To capture your gameplay, introducing Outplayed. Record anything on your PC. Highlight.
Oh, most of
What's going on? If you're new, welcome. Hit the follow button. It's my new stream of 2025, so bear with me. If it's too loud, let me know. I'll try to fix it a little bit. But today we are reacting to Bioware getting obliterated. Now, well, it says eviscerated. Sorry. And I've been watching this guy for a while, liking content. Bioware had came out with, if I'm right, it's Mass Effect, which was a great game. I'm sure there's other ones, but like the one that I played with Mass Effect. So let's jump into it. Let's see what he's got to say about it. And also, at the end of the video, we'll hit the like button. Always do that. Shout out to you for making the video. And the link to this video will be in the description at the bottom. And without further ado, let's jump into it.
I'm done. I quit. This happens every single time. I put out a video talking about some issues going on with a game or a studio, and then immediately following, things get worse, or at least from my perspective, better when it comes to Bioware. See, because after my video talking about EA, they went out and announced, without even telling me, by the way, that they were going to restructure Bioware. They're going to make it more lean, mean. They're going to make it more agile. Corporate speak for, we're going to gut the studio in hopes these guys...
None of the studios so far have done a great job at either consistently keeping their franchise alive or making really good games consistently. They come out with one. The problem is that most of these companies are doing one or two single player or multiplayer type of non-service games, and then they're focused on 3 or 4 live service games to get them out of the marginal position they feel like they're losing. Now, it should be a reverse. If you want to take this live service route, it should be one live service game, focus on that, but around that, you build out your single player games and your portfolio of games that you already have that you can do better with. Also, a big thing is they don't listen to their community, and that's a problem, right? Because we're the ones that play the game.
Don't lose us any more money. Gamers keep winning. All these game studios have been pumping out games that deliver no value to us whatsoever are now staring at the brink of destruction. They're staring at the void, and it's staring back at them, and that void is their wallets, their bank accounts. But it's time for us to feel empathetic. Don't you dare celebrate, gamer. I see you. No, 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 no. It's time to feel empathetic, or at least that's what 5 fans of Dragon Age the Veilguard, some games journalists, and a few game developers believe. Because we should feel bad for the situation that they put themselves in. You know, there's a lot of people that are trying to find the smoking gun. They're trying to figure out what happened here, pointing fingers all around. How could this happen to Bioware? How could this happen to Dragon Age the Veilguard? This game was so successful for 2 days. Man.
They're listening to their investors, and investors are like, we need to do this, that, and the third to make money. And players are like, no, you need to do this, that, and the third so we can buy your game to make money. And investors are also like, they're more concerned about monetizing, because that's where a bulk of their money comes from, over actual gameplay and story and mechanics and performance.
You know, some people are blaming the players for not buying the game. Other people are blaming the cultural climate of today's society. Other people are blaming economics, but I think that they're all looking in the wrong places. They're not thinking about it the way that they should, and I think it's time that we set them straight, because Bioware didn't just wind up in this position. It was led there.
Awaken to a world of wonder in Final Fantasy XIV Online.
Dragon Age the Veilguard, while critically successful, was a commercial failure. Yet another lesson in that if critics like something, if we don't want it and we don't buy it, well, what they say doesn't really matter all that much. Now, as I mentioned in a previous video, EA ended up telling their investors that Dragon Age the Veilguard only engaged 1.5 million players since its launch, and they were expecting 3 million players and reportedly 10 million players by the end of the game's first year. Something that not a lot of people have taken notice of is the fact that...
See? Overshooting their expectation for games. It's money. It's money, right? They're expecting more money than the effort that they're actually putting in to design and build these games. And they're also wasting money because some of these games shouldn't cost as much as they do. And if they're costing that much for the way that you're making them and developing them, and then across seas, you can go into China and they're doing it for maybe 60% of the cost. And maybe you should figure out what they're doing, right?
They said engaged 1.5 million players. That's very specific language, meaning that it's not reflective of what Dragon Age the Veilguard's actual sales are. It's just how many people bought it, reviewed it, played it as a demo, or played it through EA's subscription service, meaning that the real sales for this game are likely far lower than the number that was announced. Which is absolutely devastating for a studio like Bioware, because from an executive perspective, they don't have any passive income. They don't have any live service games that are generating revenue for that studio. The only income that they have is from their game sales, and we're a ways off before they release their next game, which means not only has Bioware not made up the money for their decade-long development costs for Dragon Age the Veilguard, but they don't even have anything to soften the blow. So from EA's perspective, this studio is doing nothing other than costing them money, which makes sense as to why layoffs would soon follow the game's failure. Now that all makes...
Now, as far as EA for a long time has been one of them people and companies that's been, I want to say, kind of falling off, but they're like hitched to some other games that bring them money because of their live service. Apex, I believe, is one of them. Battlefield, right? So they make money off these games either way. This company, specifically Bioware, which I believe is a third-party company, they don't have a live service game that's generating them money. They don't have monetizations in their game. Their games are not good enough to be monetized in order for them to make enough money to say, okay, we can take the risk, right? That's like if you work every day, but like you're living check to check, you can't really afford to take the day off because you need that money. With that being said, they can't afford to take an L because then the company could go under, right? This is the same thing that's happening with Ubisoft. Excuse me. Ubisoft with Assassin's Creed Shadow being their last like nail that they can hammer down and hopefully keep a couple players and maybe get the franchise, get the company more money. It's not really the franchise. The company needs to make more money. But 2024 and them, the games, the way they came out, hopefully they saw, they understand, and maybe they'll do better. Right now, it doesn't look like a lot of industries have changed the way they want to do things, except maybe Sony, but we'll get into that later.
Makes sense. You have to staunch the bleed, and you should probably fire the people that were responsible for making you bleed in the first place. I mean, that's a pretty common sense approach. However, common sense isn't so common in gaming anymore, and there are those who are pretty upset over this studio's layoffs. In an article from PC Gamer written by...
This is what I want to say about layoffs, right? The problem, or yes, the problem was 2019, right? We had the COVID, everybody's in the house, everybody's playing games, everybody's watching YouTube, everybody's doing this, doing that, right? So this pickup of hiring people to build out, and because the money that was there, they felt like we're going to go forever, not looking at the end of the pandemic and saying, okay, well, numbers will dwindle and go down. So these layoffs are not or shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, because a lot of it was inflated because numbers were higher and money was coming in more. People couldn't do much. And so, do I feel bad? Of course. People lost their job. They're losing, the way of living. Things change, right? But at the same time, these are things that we should have all expected because of the way that things blew up during pandemic. Now that everybody has to go back to work and everybody has to go out and do things, numbers aren't the same, right? So now we have to readjust for that impact. And that's the thing going on now. And with hiring all these people because they were making so much money, and so many people actually don't care about games. They don't, they're there for the check, the money, right? And I respect it. Everybody should be trying to get a bag, but it's the way that you get the bag. Let's get back into it.
Harvey Randall, titled "On a Pirate Ship, They Toss the Captain Overboard," Larian, head of publishing, tears into EA after Bioware layoffs waste institutional knowledge. A profit drop doesn't mean a closed shop. Harvey writes, so Bioware isn't going to be making a new Dragon Age game anytime soon, maybe ever, depending on how things go. After Dragon Age the Veilguard underperformed, much of its team, including senior members who had been making Dragon Age games for a while, were shuffled around or laid off. This isn't necessarily out of nowhere, as quite accurately called by a consultant and former Bioware vet, Mark Dara, almost prophetically, this marks the first time the studio has only had one major project to focus on. He rather optimistically stated that these devs would find their way to other EA studios and that the challenge would be involved in trying to get them back. Turns out, he was right, a lot of them are just gone entirely. Regardless of my thoughts on the game's writing, plenty of the staff now departing have made good stuff in the past. Trick Weeks, for instance, wrote frickin' Moradin in Mass Effect 2 and 3, as well as Iron Bull and Solus in Inquisition. Two characters I like very much. The foibles of Veilguard haven't left me irate so much as a little despondent, confused, and wondering whether just scrapping decades of talent in a purge is the right move at all. That's a despondency that's shared by Michael Dowse, publishing director of Baldur's Gate 3, developer Larian Studios.
See, that's the other thing. If you're getting if you're getting rid of the wrong people, right? Like, apparently these people had experience. They did a good job. Right, like they built stuff in previous games and people noticed it, right? So if you're getting rid of the wrong people, then your game's still not going to do good. If you're going to get rid of people, you get rid of people, the extra fat, right? You trim down, you say, okay, what's actually necessary? And then you move on from there. But like, if you're firing people who actually did a good job, who actually have love for games, who are actually building it, and keeping people who have no love for the game, have no respect for the consumer, the gamer, then what's the point, right? You're still going to go in that same direction.
Who took to X in a series of posts last week to more or less tear into EA for letting go of so much institutional talent. He writes, is it possible not to lay off large portions of your development teams between or after projects? Critically, retaining that institutional knowledge is key for the next game. It's often used as an excuse to trim fat, and to an extent, I understand that under financial pressure, but doesn't that just highlight how needless the aggressive efficiency of giant corporations is? Dowse isn't necessarily throwing stones from a glass house here. Larian is a big old studio, true, but it's something of an anomaly in the games industry. Tencent has a minority, non-voting stake in the company, but otherwise it's completely independent and free of shareholders. Baldur's Gate 3 very much seems like a product of a studio free from those expectations, being able to take its damn time. I'd understand if they were pumping out hit after hit. Perhaps you could argue it's working, but clearly the aggressive streamlining of layoffs aren't. It's nothing but cost cutting in the most brutal of sense. It's always the people lower down on the food chain that suffer, when it's clearly a strategy higher up the food chain that's causing the problem. Dowse caps the post off with, on a pirate ship, they toss the captain overboard.
That's the other thing, right? You also, yes, like I just said, sometimes the fat needs to be trimmed. You get rid of those who ain't working out or doing service to the game. But the real issue is big corporation, what do they call shareholders, right? Like those people who they want their money back from their investment, and then some, right? Because the whole point of an investment is to put your money in, hope the investment goes well, get your money back, and then some. So the problem is that the way that they want to do games is to monetize them to make more money than they're supposed to make, I would say. So yes, firing from the lower end is okay if you're firing the right people, but up top needs to be dealt with as well. If not, the gaming industry will never go back to the way it was. We'll never get video games that are built out of love and experiment, and like we'll just consistently get trash.
Board. In a second clarifying post, he adds, to make it absolutely clear, what I hate about the way layoffs are carried out is that they are done before decision makers know what to do with the studio, and not as a result of figuring out a direction. Yeah, and on a pirate ship, if the captain smelled even a hint of mutiny, they'd hang him, they'd maroon him on an island, or they'd drag them behind the ship.
You swore she'd go free.
Don't dare impugn me on her, boy. I agreed she'd go free, but it was you who failed to specify when or where.
Generally, almost all times, I end up agreeing with Michael Dowse on a variety of different issues because he understands the industry and the players in a way that very few do. However, here, I have to disagree with him. Look, institutional knowledge is important. You need veteran talent to maintain the creative vision of any long-standing franchise, to refine its mechanics, to push quality forward over time. Larian Studios is the perfect example of that. You can see the evolution from Divinity Original Sin to Baldur's Gate 3. They didn't just make another CRPG. They took everything that they had learned from their past games and built something legendary. But that's the difference. Larian grew their talent, and their talent grew with them. Bioware, they bled out long ago. Most of Bioware's best developers were already gone before or during the development of Anthem. The moment that EA forced them to go make a live service game instead of doing what they do best, that's when it all started. BioWare's decline didn't start today. It started the moment that EA lost the people who made the studio special in the first place. And that's EA's fault. He's not wrong in that. But where I disagree with Dowse is that I don't think that there's any institutional knowledge that's worth keeping here in the first place. Because who exactly is BioWare today? The idea of institutional knowledge falls apart when the people that are still working on the games today aren't the same people that made them great in the first place. The studio is a ship of Theseus, the same name, but all of the parts have been replaced so many times that it's not the same BioWare anymore. Think about it for a second. Veilguard's game director, Corrine Bush, didn't come from RPGs, he came from The Sims. That tells you everything you need to know about the creative direction at BioWare today. And even if there are some veterans...
See, people getting promoted or moved over into things they don't actually have knowledge about shouldn't happen, right? EA allowing that their best developers and designers and people who design games previously who did a great job, you let them go, or you tell them, hey, don't do Mass Effect ? The new one, right? If they were doing a new one, they say go do this log service game we got going on. Example, Respawn. What's that? Apex Legends, right? Which isn't doing good either, but doing that. Now you got people working on a game similar to a game they could have been working on that would have done well under their hands, and instead you got these new people who don't really understand how to design a game or build a game or understand. And most of these people are not even playing the older games to even get kind of an idea of what they should be building.
Veteran developers that are remaining. I mean, Corrine Bush, Trick Weeks, and a few others have been with BioWare and EA for many years, but who's to say they're still worth keeping? People love to romanticize institutional knowledge as if it's the only thing that matters is how long someone has actually worked on a franchise. But people change, their beliefs change, their motivations change, and over time, that knowledge can turn into a poison that destroys what made a game special in the first place. Dragon Age had a lot of issues. The combat was dry, the gameplay was repetitive, but most importantly, the narrative, the core of what makes a narrative-driven game actually work, was fundamentally flawed. And that's not just a random failure, that's the direct result of your institutional knowledge turning toxic because the writers at Bioware didn't write a story that resonated with people anymore, because I don't think they can write a story that will resonate with people anymore. Over time, they changed as people, and I think people forget that people change. They forgot how to connect with an audience. They wrote a mature rated game with the softest.
That is a big thing, right? With a lot of games now. Everything is multiplayer focused or visually focused over story, right? And when you think about a lot of games that you played previously or in the past, I'm 37 years old, so I played a lot of games. And what it really comes down to when you remember certain games is one of two things: who you played with, if it's a multiplayer game, or it's who you played with. But the bigger one is story, right? Why you remember that game, because the story was so good, right? Like I beat my first game, I think, that I played all the way through and beat it had to be Halo, right? Like I believe the second one. Great story, right? Enjoyable story. And then my other game after that was Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, which of course we're all waiting for the next one to come out, so I can't wait for that. But you remember these games for their story. A lot of the times now, they're not building for story, they're building for content, and not good content, payable content, something where people are like, oh, okay, I'll pay for that. So what people used to build games, oh, I want to see if people like this idea in the game, right? It's more of, hey, would you pay for me to put this idea in the game? And that's what's killing it. Nobody's actually working on stories. And don't get me started on how much AI they're probably using to write most of these stories, right? Am I okay with that? To each their own, right? But if the story's trash, most people won't. If the mechanics is good, and that's the thing with games, right? Like if mechanics are really, really good, you can get away with not having a valid story. But if your mechanics are no good and your story's no good, that's a no good game. Just what it is. And it doesn't work the other way around, by the way. If your mechanics suck and your story's good, it's still a no good game, because no one's gonna play through it because mechanics don't work there. You know? So, back into it, y'all.
Most sanitized character portrayals imaginable. They aimed it at an undefined, non-existent, young adult audience, populating it with a cast of millennial, maladjusted, socially awkward archetypes who felt more like reflections of their own personal social circles than actually compelling characters. And then on top of that, they forced in divisive, socially liberal gender themes, not because it made sense to the story, not because it was actually good for the game, but because they wanted to push their own worldview into the game. It added nothing to the game's quality and ultimately only took away from it. At a time where gaming is more divided than ever, they doubled down on their own ideological messaging instead of focusing on telling a damn good story.
And that's what I'm saying. They're not telling good story.
Ready or not,
They want to not get
here I come.
They believe that their
representation of like the way you see yourself or other people see yourself. You want to see that in video games. Okay. But there's time and place and a way to do it, right? And of course, not everybody's gonna feel the same way. They're different opinions, right? But when it comes down to it, if it's in your face all the time, 24/7, it becomes, for lack of a better word that I can find at the moment, annoying. The route that I would go with these different gender things, if I'm gonna put it in a game, is I let you create a character, and then your choices for what that character is, all that's all you, right? That's it. But as far as characters in the game, if it doesn't go, and that's the thing, right? Like if it narratively doesn't fit with the story, it's going to look at a place. It's not going to make the story good, and it's not going to make people happy about the story, right? If it's forced, people are not going to accept it, right? And so I think all the companies need to sit down, evaluate their portfolio for games they have, say this story was good, this story is good, how can we expand on this story in a way that makes it better, and start working on those things. Because these companies are not like new, right? Bioware especially is not new. So you have catalogs of games. You just got to lock in a story. The word I'm looking for here. Polish up some mechanics. It's not always about adding new stuff, but more of enhancing what you already done. Mass Effect 1 and 2, really good. And the way that their stories are built out, decision making, all that is really, really good. But did they do that with their other games? No. Are other games doing the same thing? No. Let's get back into it, y'all.
Perspectives, their experiences, and their beliefs mattered more than the needs of the audience or the financial survival of their own co-workers. And when a studio starts prioritizing personal agendas over player engagement, over financial stability, over creative integrity, there is only one outcome: failure. So why should we mourn the loss of that institutional knowledge? Why would you want to keep people around who actively killed the very studio that they're working for? If a studio's leadership and long-term developers become so disconnected from their audience, so lost in their own ideological echo chamber, then what value does...
That's it right there. He said it. They got disconnected from their audience. They forgot why they started building games in the first place. Why gaming had become as polarized and as big as it is. They forgot, disconnected. They can't relate to what the consumer is going through. It's the same reason that games want to go up to $100, but we'll watch a video on that and we'll get into that. If you like it so far, hit the like, subscribe button. I'm live when I'm doing these, so go over to Twitch and it'll be live. Hit the notification so you can get notified when I do these, and we're back into it.
Does that knowledge have anymore? None. Absolutely none. Not a single drop of value. I am so sick and tired of this narrative that's being peddled that firings and layoffs are immediately a bad thing in this industry. We have an industry that is running to the defense of people that are bad at their job, that are putting the livelihoods of their fellow co-workers at risk at every single given turn. You have to route that out. Simple as that. Done. End of conversation. Sure, EA has had their hand in this. I'm not going to pretend like they haven't. They are the ones that didn't hold on to the knowledge, to the talent that that studio had for many years. They let those people go. They made decisions that made those people leave. But when it comes to this decision to fire the writing staff of Dragon Age the Veilguard and its leadership, no, this is common sense. This isn't heavy-handed. This isn't a quick decision. No, you recognized a problem.
Makes sense. One of the biggest criteria for a game, in my opinion, is the story. We just said this, right? You can have good mechanics get through a game, but it doesn't work the other way around. But also, story is key, right? We said that. When you remember games, it's because of their story. Excuse me. So no, you shouldn't feel bad if people are getting fired. Listen, if you're like me, I've worked many, many jobs, still work to this day. And point is that when I first started working, you always had that one person, right? There's one person who don't really work. They come to work, but they don't really work. But now, it's not one person. It's 3 people, right? And you could be working in a team of 4, but 3 of them are not working. It used to be that, oh, you got that one friend who don't work. Now you got them 3 friends who don't work when they're at work. And that's a problem, right? It's the same thing here in the industry. I'm sure that there are a lot of people who are just there to collect a check. They're not really working. It's like bare minimum. Hey, don't let them not see you doing anything type of thing. And I hate that. Do your job. Do it right, or don't do it at all. Get fired. I'm not mad.
And you got rid of it. Simple as that. And to be honest with you, they had to do this. They had to show the audience, they had to show the players, they had to show their investors that they still have value in BioWare, that they still value BioWare's reputation. And from my perspective, this actually gives me more faith in Mass Effect 5. Because a lot of people miss this. The director of Mass Effect 5 was already trying to distance themselves before Dragon Age the Veilguard even came out. I talked about this in a video way early on, but when people are asking about the writing, when people are asking about the themes, when people are asking about the art style, they said, no, we are two completely different teams. We have two completely different plans. We're about grit and realism, and that's what we want. That's what I want. And you know, the thing is, we're talking about firing that team from an executive perspective, or even just from an onlooker's perspective. Given today's social political climate, given today's political climate, given the way that that game received so much backlash, given how disconnected it was and the themes that it included, that writing team, that leadership, likely wouldn't just lay their head down. No, they would feel emboldened. They push even harder in the next game because they would want to fight back against the perceived enemy that they have. That's exactly what they would do. And they would waste even more money. They'd probably have even more people lose their jobs, and it would sacrifice even more of the studio's reputation. That would be the end result. But they recognized that it was an issue, and they got rid of it. Simple as that. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, there's a lot of people that are upset over the firings, a lot of people that are upset over the layoffs. And the funny thing is that none of it actually has to do with Dragon Age the Veilguard. None of it actually has to do with the quality of the game or anything like that. It's the fact that you have folks that are out there that believed a multi-billion-dollar company was an ally. It had more to do. They look at this as an attack against their beliefs, as an attack against their identity, when it's just a company making a smart business decision. Why do people want multi-billion-dollar companies to be moral arbiters? It makes no sense to me. And they don't.
Yeah, companies are not worried about your perceived situation. They're worried about their bottom line. They're worried about their dollar, right? And if you're building products that are not making money, you can't sell that product, which means we're not making money, which means they can't pay you. They're not worried about your ideals and your situations of personal perseverance. They don't care. They care about their bottom line, their dollar. And that's what people got to understand. These companies are not for you, they're for themselves. Their bottom line is their pocket.
Don't have any interest in being one in the first place. And people are starting to wake up to that now. I've come across a lot of comments from developers, journalists, and players lamenting at the supposed cultural impact that is lost with the exodus of Dragon Age the Veilguard's writing team, BioWare's writing team. One streamer, for example, dramatically claimed that Veilguard failed because it chose to represent. That's why it's being attacked. And now that the staff is gone, they don't think that BioWare has the right intentions anymore. But my question is, what intentions should a game studio have other than delivering a quality product? None. There shouldn't be anything else. Games are not meant to be your ally. They are not meant to fight for you. They are meant to entertain and make money. That's it. Some of BioWare's writers may have seen themselves as stewards of justice, pushing personal beliefs through their work, but marketing and executives, you are nothing more to them than a consumer to be manipulated and milked for money. And yet, people will defend garbage video games not because they're good, not because it respects the franchise or its legacy, but because it represents something they want to see in the world, regardless of its quality. There's this sense of defeat among certain groups, not because the game failed, but because the pendulum is swinging in the other direction. For years, certain beliefs have been pushed aggressively and across all media forms, gaming, movie, music, television, whatever it might be. And those who disagreed were told to shut up and take it, even if their concerns were about quality and not ideology. I've seen this firsthand. I know exactly how frustrating it can be to simply ask for a good game and receive nothing but hate and vitriol in response. I've seen Reddit threads dissecting my entire personality, applying beliefs to me that I don't even hold just because I dared to criticize a game. And now what? Those same people that have spent years calling other people bigots for criticizing a game's quality are learning firsthand that their opinions are not the popular ones. The gaslighting isn't working. It didn't work. Why? Because
Here's another thing I'll say, right? There was a time when people who were selling things to the customer, whatever, they had a certain line they wouldn't cross, right? Because they understood that you still needed the customer to spend the money. Nowadays, they feel like they can disrespect the consumer and they'll gain money still, somehow. Respect for the consumer has went out the window. And that's something that I don't know if it could come back or be fixed, but it kind of needs to be this balance, right? Yeah, I understand. It's we live in this space where if a consumer feels a way, he can make a post. If a developer feels a way, they can make a post. If a executive feels a way, they can make a post, right? The thing is that you have to realize that then on certain situations, if you're an exec and you say something out of pocket, that can cause you to lose a lot of money. A fan says something out of pocket, they don't lose anything, but maybe they're blocked from your account, so they lose access to your account. That's it, right? They'll go on about their life. Developers, same reason, right? You could say, a consumer could say, hey, this developer did this, it was bad, it sucked, whatever, right? And he loses access to saying that to you where you can see it, maybe, right? But you could lose your job for saying something that's unnecessary.
Dragon Age the Veilguard didn't fail because of its themes, it failed because it was a bad game. And what I don't understand is, why are people wanting to settle for bad representation when you could demand better? How is Tosh a good representation of anyone? Just like I wouldn't want the stereotype of every white guy being a villain in movies, television shows, and games, why would you want poorly written characters reinforcing negative stereotypes of the identities and communities that you seem to care about? Shouldn't the goal have been to actually have characters that resonate with people, characters people actually like? But instead of asking for better, people are instead choosing to blame the audience for rejecting a bad game. I found a Reddit post titled, "Chuds Ruined Bioware," which said, "Hope you assholes are happy for ruining the careers of many employees. If you didn't like it, all you had to do was ignore it and let the ones who do enjoy it be." But no, you had to review bomb and hate grift the game, and now Bioware is on its last legs. You all must feel so proud and are edging to Asmongold videos in celebration of EA gutting Bioware. And in that same thread, I found the perfect response. Chuds did not ruin Bioware. The anti-woke crowd tried attacking Baldur's Gate 3, but it was a solid game, and it's doing amazingly. The only people who ruined Bioware are EA and Bioware themselves. Giving the anti-woke crowd credit for this only emboldens them and makes them believe that their tantrums work. Yes, the anti-woke crowd is annoying, but at the end of the day, while you and many others love Veilguard, plenty of people did not, and for valid reasons. It's okay that you liked a game that wasn't a commercial success, but blaming that on the wrong people does no good. Bioware should be held accountable for their own failures. The funny thing is, players did exactly what the original poster asked. They didn't like
Biggest thing in the world. People taking accountability for their own actions, right? It doesn't happen.
the game, they didn't want to play the game, and as a result, they didn't buy it, and that's why Dragon Age the Veilguard failed. And the reply is completely right. Baldur's Gate 3 included almost all the exact same themes, if not even more flexibility in choice and expression, yet with what little backlash it had, none of it had any effect because it was a good game, and that's what really matters here. While I do think that social ideology definitely played a role in Dragon Age the Veilguard's failure, I don't view it as some culture war victory. It's a customer victory. It's proving that players aren't putting up with slop anymore. But there's another major reason as to why Dragon Age the Veilguard failed, and some people want to forget this. It's because it's not the game that we were supposed to get. Dragon Age the Veilguard was a game without identity. It started off as a live service game built to be the next multiplayer RPG because EA wanted to turn Dragon...
That's the other thing, right? Yeah, they start building out a game for one thing, and then midway through they say, no, let's build it out for something else. Now, you don't know what you're really building, right? Because half of your beginning is still there, and now you're gonna have another, let's say a third. So let's say a third of the game of the beginning of your idea right there. But now a second, third of the game is a second part of an idea that you came up with midway through creation. And now the ending of the game is the third idea. The thirds of the idea, right? Which would make it 100% of the idea. But it's divided into three different ideas, and all three ideas don't really coincide or make the game any better. So in that case, the game is unplayable because they didn't know what they wanted to do with it. They didn't know the direction they wanted to go with it. And if you, the person building the game, doesn't know the direction you going with it, how is the consumer going to know where you're trying to go with it? They're going to be confused, if not more confused, because they didn't understand what you were trying to build. But they didn't understand what you were trying to build because you didn't know what you were trying to build.
Dragon Age into another Destiny, but when the backlash for live service games hit the industry like a sledgehammer, they scrambled to turn it back into a single-player RPG. And when you have a project that's built for one thing and abruptly pivoted to something else, you have to ask yourself who's going to fix it. You need strong leadership. You need a creative director that understands how to bring everything together, who understands RPG mechanics, combat design, storytelling, and pacing. But Bioware didn't have that. Instead, they put the wrong people in charge, people who, rather than fixing a game's fundamental issues, chose to focus entirely on the story that they wanted to tell, on the message that they had to deliver. They ignored the gameplay, they ignored the mechanics, they ignored the world building and player choice. Unlike Baldur's Gate 3, that didn't do any of those things, they made sure all of those things were the most important thing in their design. Their message became the only thing that mattered. Notice something, that the designers, the environmental artists, the sound techs, the gameplay developers, these aren't the people that got fired. They were the ones that got repositioned because their failure wasn't in how the game looked or functioned. The failure was in the fact that none of that mattered to their leadership. None of the parts fit together, and the customers were delivered something that was an incohesive Frankenstein of a game where all of the effort went into bad writing and poor messaging. And that's why this was all inevitable. Because here's the thing, I don't care if a game includes themes that I personally disagree with, and I don't think a lot of people do either. I don't care if it explores politics, gender, religion, or whatever else a writer wants to tackle, as long as the game is fun and engaging, I'll play it. At the end of the day, I just want to enjoy a good game. That's all I've ever wanted. I think that's what most people want. But when a game's themes aren't woven naturally into its world, when they lack nuance, when they feel like a cudgel rather than a conversation, and the gameplay takes a backseat to all of that, well, I don't see that as an ideological attack. I see that just as a bad video game. I don't see these developers as some grand ideological enemy pushing an agenda. I just see them being shit at their jobs. That's what so many people fail to understand. It's not about representation, it's about execution. You can tackle any subject, any theme, and if it's done poorly, if it's forced, if it sacrifices storytelling and gameplay in favor of preaching, well, then it fails. Not because people are intolerant, not because people weren't ready for it, but because it was badly written and poorly implemented. I'm sick of these cultural battle lines being drawn every single time a game flops. I'm sick of developers and media drawing those lines. I'm sick of players and people defending these games and using inclusivity as a shield from criticism. A bad game is a bad game, period. That's it. There's no other reason behind it. No amount of social messaging, no amount of good intentions, no amount of defense from games journalists is going to change that, because players are done settling. They don't care about your message. They don't care about your characters, and they sure as the hell don't care about your employees if the game sucks. And
just for example, right? Elden Ring. Let's go before that, right? Dark Souls 3. Great game. Mechanically, gameplay wise, the whole thing. But how many people actually know what the story is? It's too confusing, convoluted. But no one cares because the gameplay is good, the mechanics is good, the designs are good.
Dragon Age the Veilguard, well, that game sucked. In one of my last streams, I ended up having a AAA developer reach out and talk to me for a little bit, and they told me that in all their years of experience, they've worked across the entire industry, whether it was Sony, whether it was Activision, all these big names. They said that never do you see people lose their job if they're actually good at their job. 12 years in the industry, they never saw a single person that was good at their job lose their job. They said anytime you see these layoffs, it is almost always people that are underqualified or bad at their job. That's it. They went on to then say that the people that are still at Bioware, the people that were working on Dragon Age the Veilguard that still have a job somehow, Well, they knew exactly what was going on, what went wrong with Dragon Age, but they likely couldn't talk about it. They couldn't speak up. They had to couch their criticism in soft language, toxic positivity.
Yeah,
And
because
while ideology and social beliefs might have something to do with it, I'm sure there is an impact there for sure.
Because the higher ups are the ones making
poor
the
leadership
decisions.
is a plague to a lot of these companies, and that's likely exactly what EA was targeting here. Chuds didn't kill Bioware. Bioware killed Bioware. I'm hoping that with all the big failures we saw in 2024, that a lot of these studios and these publishers can see the markers for failure.
Me too.
They're recognizing them better and able to reposition and change their games appropriately to be successful in the coming years. You would have to, because there's just way too many instances, way too many examples of what players don't want and what players do want. And I'm hoping they're learning the lesson. I feel like a prophet, man. It's so crazy to be this far into the future now. I guess not really. It was only like, what, back in...
See, the thing is, like him and myself, we played a lot of games, right? We've seen and understood what good gameplay mechanics are. We understood what good storyline and what good decision making in video game industry can do for a video game, can do for the consumer, right? It's a different feeling. But before I get into it, let's finish this up. It's not that long left, so let's finish it, and then I'll give you my little thoughts, and we'll get out of here.
When does this game come out? Like November or September or something like that? I put out a tweet right after all of the reviews went up, and I was like, there is no way. You guys are trying to protect this game. You gave it to reviewers early that you knew really liked it already. You kept it away from the people that you knew didn't like it, and then you wanted to protect its launch. Give it a positive light. Try to get more people to buy it. And I was like, there is no way this is going to work. I cannot believe that you guys are even doing this in the first place. And it didn't work. Maybe it did for some people. I actually feel really, really bad now that I think about it. And also, games journalists need to feel bad. Shame on you guys. For the people that were out there that were defending this game, standing in front of it, shielding it from criticism, shielding it from all the people saying that it wasn't going to be worth their money, you likely led some people to go buy that game, and they hated it. And they wasted their money because they went on your word, because they trusted you. Gross.
And I agree. I feel like, and here's the thing, right? They also probably played, they probably also paid streamers to play the game and say the game is good, right? And with them doing that, you got people going out there buy the game. They didn't enjoy the game, wasted their money, right? And here's what I'll say to that real quick. That's the video. Like it, as you saw, I liked it. The link to the video will be in my description. Shout out to Legendary Drops. Thank you. I appreciate it. I will react to more of your content. But before I go here, real quick, I'll say this. We have to take our time as streamers, content creators who have the power to influence other people into buying products. We have to take our time with what we decide to sponsor or decide to push out to our fan base, because players and people who watch your channel, they expect you to have the answer. And no, of course you don't always have the answer, right? But what you want is for your fan base to trust you. And if you get paid to play a game and say the game is good, they go buy the game and the game is bad, that's a bad look on you, right? So the next time you say, oh, this game is good, they don't go buy it. Now they can miss out on a good game because of what you said, right? So I think from now on, streamers need to really, really evaluate on what games they say are good. I understand you want to make a bag, you want to make your money, but it's time for us to understand that as an influencer, as a content creator, as someone who has power to say buy this or don't buy that, boycott this. We have to review and evaluate the things that we initially decide we want to give visual representation, or let's say a shield of approval on buying it. For me, like they're talking about a lot of games that I bought, I usually wait now. I wait till there's a sale. I wait until there's a review, because I can't trust streamers to tell me the game is good. I can't trust certain developers to be like the game is good, right? So, but that's the video. If you watched it all the way through, hit the like, subscribe button. Comment down below. What do you think about Bioware and the layoffs, and maybe what they could do better to come out of this in a brighter light as far as building a game, right? Because their last game was trash. So now they got to work on building a better game to kind of justify the layoffs, right? Because if you lay off all these people and your game is still trash, then what was that for? But till next time, y'all have a good night. Thank y'all for hanging out with me, and I'll be back with another one.